All right, we'll call this meeting to order. Bailey, can we get a roll call?
Commissioner Archer, Commissioner Lorge.
Here.
Commissioner Finneman,
Here.
Commissioner Husnick,
Here.
Commissioner Huntosh,
Here.
Commissioner Roberts,
Here.
and President Winnick.
Here, I'd ask everybody to rise for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, look for an approval of the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda.
Do we have a second on that?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And looking for an approval of the minutes from July 23rd.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for July 23rd.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Approved? Or any abstains? No, approved.
Abstains?
What's that?
Oh, I thought you said obscenes.
Oh. Data center presentation, Bruce Saylor, welcome.
Thank you. You should be ready to go on your presentation, Joe.
Okay.
It should be on the monitors in just a second here.
All right.
Good.
We should be getting it up here.
Should be up there. There we go.
Oh,
There you go. So you know you
Hold
have
it,
full control.
move up and down or do anything.
Thank you. All right, good evening. My name is Bruce Saylor. I'm the principal for Community and Economic Development at Connexus Energy. And Dan asked if I could come in and just talk a little bit about data centers, what we've learned over the past couple of years, kind of the different uniquenesses of data centers, and really, probably more importantly, the activity that we're seeing so far. So really, what I was going to talk about, and this is all high-level stuff, and we can dive down as far as you want, but really, you know, what is a data center? What really do site selectors look for? What are the benefits to communities? And what does the future look like for data centers? And just to say, with Connexus Energy, over the last year and a half, we've been working on 24 different economic development projects, let's say, large projects. And of those, 7 are data centers, either that have decided to go elsewhere, but so 7 of the 27 projects we've been working on over the last year and a half have actually been data centers. So really starting with what is a data center? And data center basically is a rack full of servers or computers. It's basically 4 walls in a building, high walls, a ceiling, and each of them have individual areas where each company can come in and put different sets of racks for their own data centers. And there's 2 types of data centers. One is called an enterprise data center, which the organization owns its own data center, like Visa, for example. They don't want anybody else touching their data, so they own, they operate, they maintain their own data centers. The other type of data centers is called a co-location data center, where this is actually a picture of a co-location out in Denver, where they lease certain square feet of a data center for a particular company. It can be a large one, small one, but it's either a co-location or an enterprise solution for data centers. And what we've seen over the last couple of years, and this is a kind of a aggregation of a lot of the requests that have been coming in. We're under several NDAs, so I can't get into some of the specifics for different projects, but a lot of them are looking for cooler climates. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the other things that are needed, but some of the data centers are located in Texas. It gets kind of warm in Texas in the summertime, so they're doing a lot of cooling as they move forward. So there seems to be a migration to kind of the cooler climates, where Minnesota happens to be a nice cooler climate. It might not feel like that today, but definitely cooler than Texas, Arizona type area. Most of the requests, they want to be near major population centers, probably 40, 45 miles from an international airport. is kind of what they're looking for. They don't want to be way out 300 miles away from nowhere, because a lot of times they have to fly in technicians, engineers to work in their facilities, so they just want to have easy access to an airport. Large tracts of land. They like to see it flat. They'd like to see no hazardous materials or underground gas lines, et cetera, going through particular plats. And again, the first tier of the metropolitan area doesn't have a lot of green space left. But Forest Lake is really prime. You've got some flat land, some areas that could be good potential for something like this. Most of them look for direct access to the electrical transmission system. So with our system, we own Great River Energy, who is our power supplier. They will actually own their own substation, and we'll just have Great River Energy come in and just directly feed substations. So it's kind of we call it a sweet spot. You have to find an area where all these nice spots interact together. So besides the transmission system, they want direct access to fiber, because it's a highly, user of fiber. They need to have water and sewer. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on as far as what the capacities that they're looking at. And probably most importantly is shovel ready. They really would like to have, when they're making their decisions, either out east or out west or whatever, they would just want to make sure that a lot of that site is ready, from archaeological component, wetland delineation, different things like that. They would like to see those already checked off the box to say that that engineering is already done, that they don't have to wait another 3 to 6 months, to do that when they're doing their due diligence. So the more you can have a project shovel ready, the more likelihood it's going to be raised up on kind of a higher priority moving forward. What are some of the benefits to the communities? We're seeing and hearing anywhere of investments from $20 million from the plant that's going in up to close to $1 billion, looking at some of these data center sites. I haven't confirmed this with any numbers, but it sounds like they require minimal services as far as police, fire, roads. They don't have a ton of employees there. They're not going to have a bunch of semis going in every single day. So it puts less wear and tear on some of the local infrastructure. They definitely are a high user for some facilities like water. But again, like Connected Energy, we call them billing units. The more billing units you sell, you pay for the infrastructure as you move forward. And there is definitely some high-paying jobs coming in. Anywhere from 5 to 10 employees or contractors moving in and out to possibly 100 employees that are making anywhere between $75,000 to $120,000 a year. So that's what we've been seeing with some of the requests that have been coming in. And when we talk about the future of data centers, all you could really need to do is look at how many devices are attached to the internet, from your phone to your thermostat at home to other devices. All of these devices have data stored someplace. So really looking at it from a holistic view, we're seeing more data centers, we're seeing more requests for data centers as we move forward. And one of the other things, I didn't add to the slide, but other typical requirements, they look for anywhere between 20 to 200 acres is kind of the area that they're looking for. Power-wise, 5 to 180 megawatts, which we have enough capacity in this area to do that. Some of the concerns are the water peak flow rate, anywhere from 100 to 3,000 gallons a minute. Now, the 3,000 gallons a minute is after 3 years when they ramp up to a certain point. However, there's a huge movement in data centers now to go to a less water or even a water-less movement. They all want to be renewable. They all want solar energy credits, things like that. Their next step that they're looking at right now is just drastically reducing the amount of water that they need, going into a waterless system, which works well for Minnesota when they have cooling towers and they can basically just recirculate that existing water. Some of the sewer peak flow rates, anywhere between 200 to 1,500 gallons per minute. Again, that can be lessened with the new technology. When we start seeing the next generation data centers that are actually being built today. They call them next generation because they're consuming a lot less water and sewer, still using a lot of power, which is for some of us okay, But from the utility perspective, that's where they're at. And then on the telecommunications, again, direct access to fiber, and they want 4G phone coverage is really what we've been seeing of these last 7 RFIs that have been coming in, kind of all bubbled up to the surface on that. Kind of quick, easy, but I've been to a couple of different conferences. Definitely, we see the interest. When you look at that shovel-ready, I would say of all of the requirements, that shovel-ready is probably the one that's the highest on the list to take care of. We would certainly help with some of that. If you have a facility or a site that you're looking at in a Connexus Energy Service territory, we'd able to partner to help defray some of those costs to make it shovel-ready, because it's good for both of us, to be honest.
Well, thank you very
Questions?
much.
Yep.
Couple of questions for you. With the amount of data centers that are getting built out there, are we seeing, like Great Rivers being competitive in energy costs?
Yes, definitely. The last couple of RFIs that we've sent out, we've been around the 6 cent per kilowatt hour range, which is a highly competitive rate. So we offer special rates for something like this. It's, depending on their power usage, but we would be cheaper than a lot of the eastern, western US, so we are absolutely in the game when it comes to rates.
Is there anything outstanding that, Minnesota isn't getting more of these? I mean, is there a reason why they're getting built in other communities and other states?
I think it's a matter of time. It really is, because, there's tax credits on a lot of the data center equipment. There's other incentives through deed. Greater MSP is out nationally and internationally promoting Minnesota. So I think it's just a matter of time. And I think it's like everything else. Once you get a large data center in an area, you're going to find 2 or 3 or 4 popping up right next to it, because it's going to be a hub. And I know there's one state that escapes me at this point in time down south, that one whole area has just been massively built out with data centers because they have the fiber, they have the power, they've had the communities that were engaged and provide some incentives. I mean, you don't have to give the farm away on all of this, but everything just starts happening once you get that first big win.
Sure. A couple more questions for you, unless anybody else is. When you say the need for fiber, I mean, I would assume that a large data center's got to put in their own fiber. They're not just going to use, I mean, there isn't that much fiber available, I would think, in a typical installation if they didn't intend to put a data center in to begin with.
Well, we did work with a project, Project Pepper here, and we did meet with Zaos, and Zao has the capacity. So a lot of it is they just need to be connected directly to whatever hub is locally for some backhaul. What they do on the other side of that, I'm not sure, but Zaos is guaranteed that there's definitely enough capacity in this area. There's enough dark fiber in the ground that they can lease.
I think I can help build off that a little bit. When we talked to Zayo before, and they didn't give me specifics in terms of exactly where the kind of the spine of the connection is, but they said kind of adjacent to the trail over here, and somewhere there's a big fiber connection between Minneapolis and Duluth that's right in our backyard. So we do have fairly robust fiber backbone that's here, and then if a data center goes east or west of that, they would just do the lines back into that, and they're able to do. And we kind of met with them and said, here's some of the specs that these data centers are bringing forward. Are we able to meet the capacity here? They said, you have absolutely no problem if they need to do, because some of them will have like a requirement to do like 2 circular loops. So if one loop gets broken, they have the other one, so they can maintain connectivity. And they said that's even possible, just kind of given what we have in our backyard. So we kind of already have access to a pretty robust fiber network that's already here, which kind of puts us in an advantage when you compare other cities. They may have some of the other functions, but maybe have a little bit tougher access getting to the cable. Our cable is right in our backyard and run right through the middle of town.
And in addition to that, the other thing that we learned from Zaos, and even with another data center project, is how quick they can provide that lateral service too. It's not 6 months or 12 months. I mean, they were able to, project it that they could get that loop in quickly, which that's definitely what data centers want to hear.
All right. I guess the last question surprised me, the amount of land that they're looking for. I mean, obviously everything's inside the building, except the heat exchangers, but is there a reason, just security, they want to push their perimeter out? Or?
Definitely security. The data center that I visited last month in Denver, I mean, it's highly secured. It's unbelievable what you have to go through. I mean, they've got fence perimeters around, gates, guards, but it still looks halfway decent. And, you know, so they need to have backup generators, you know, so besides the servers, they have their generators sitting outside, backup generators. They have a large UPS system, you know, uninterrupted power supply system that if there is a power blink, that UPS system can take that building on for probably 10 minutes, even though it takes maybe a minute for those generators to come on. So a lot of those is what's taking up a lot of that space. And then they don't necessarily need to be right next to other communities and stuff. So they like the large space, probably more importantly to expand. You know, if they do expand, in fact, this one project that we're working on right now, they've already hinted at, you know, well, what if we wanted to double in size? Could we do that? So I think it's future-proofing where they're at.
And now the substation they would require, would that be just basically allotted at an existing substation?
That would be right on their property. We would build it right on their property, and they would own it and maintain it, and, yep. But that would be included within that 100-acre, site.
All right.
When you say they tend to cluster, what else clusters around them, or is that not the point? I'm just going to start from a naive point of view. So the symbiotic relationship they would have to their surrounding environment. They don't seem to need anything other than what they need, and others who might cluster with them might be of like kind. But we're not stimulating like tech businesses in close proximity, are we?
That's correct, yeah. It gets back to that sweet spot. It's where's high capacity power, where's the fiber, you know, where's the utilities, and that's where they kind of cluster to, is that, and then once they see their competitor there, oh, it must be a good spot, you know, type thing. So yeah, they're not working in conjunction with each other. It's the utility structure that they're really looking for.
The data centers that I've experienced have been within complexes serving their own purposes.
Okay.
I'm not that familiar with what it's like to have either a large hub and or a condominiumized, whatever you call it.
The co-location?
Yeah, the co-location idea.
Yep.
But still, that doesn't ask or compel businesses, like tech businesses of sorts, to be anywhere near them or want to set up adjacent.
Correct.
And it really doesn't draw any other kind of symbiotic relationship, does it?
That, you would be correct, yeah. I mean, you could actually have a data center out in the middle of Montana if they had fiber, you know, if they had an airport close by, you know, type thing. So yeah, that would be correct.
And so minimal support actually outside the building other than its security, delivery, movement within the context of the building and then a large square footage building. And that, I don't know, how do you see scale here in our area? Do you just have a sense of what scale might actually come to the doorstep?
Well, Project Pepper was looking at that site just down the road here. I can't remember, Dan, how many acres that was?
120?
I mean, that was, you know, and Project Pepper is still in play. They haven't made a formal decision on that yet, but I mean, that was a sweet spot that they were looking at. And one of the other benefits of that particular site is that it sounds like the city of Forest Lake owns it, which makes things even easier. You know, every other project that we're working on, it's private party ownership, which adds a little bit more complexity to it. So again, it's speed to market for data centers, is how quickly can they make a decision, get their due diligence done, get the, have the engineering undone, that they can make a decision, you know, quickly.
I believe the first half of the Project Pepper was private owned, wasn't it?
I believe part of it was, yeah.
Yeah, there were two sites, potential sites, and one
Yep.
was privately owned.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you know where that was, here in Forest Lake?
I don't know if we can, if it's still in play, I don't know if we want to disclose any of that yet.
Yeah, maybe not.
Okay, so there might be a site in play at this point that's scaled appropriately for a data center to consider it. It's mostly, you know, defending land use around it and understanding that there's a value to the land use around it and not wanting to concede that to something that is kind of introspective. So that's the 100, the 80, 120, whatever we keep talking about for acreages south of the city here that the city owns, is pretty vital in a variety of ways. And so it's kind of hard to picture that enclave there.
Right. And what I can say is definitely the 35E corridor, all the way from, White Bear all the way up to Wyoming, is getting a lot of looks. And not just data centers, but other, large companies that's looking for tracts of land like that. So, again, in my opinion, it's definitely getting to be a nice sweet spot in this area.
Well, thank you very much.
Great.
One other question, with just energy costs. Now, manufacturers, other businesses, do they reach out to you guys
Yeah.
as well, looking for, what rate can we get on building XYZ?
On the electric rates?
Yeah.
Yeah. We have certain different incentives. One of them is a large load discount. That's basically, we can offer a discount ramped up to whatever their actual usage is. So we can go in, we just want to make sure as a nonprofit, we have to make sure that rate's whole, that nobody else is subsidizing that particular rate. But yeah, we definitely work with all these companies that we've been working on these projects with special rates.
All right. Well, thank you
Great.
very much.
Ready.
Appreciate your
Thank you.
time.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Dan, do you want to take us through the budget discussions?
Yep, President, members of the EDA, after the last meetings, we had fairly a robust discussion on the 2019 budget. Went back, had a conversation with the city's finance director just about some of the questions that were brought up in terms of carryover and the 19 budget, and was informed that anything that's not spent in 2018's budget will automatically go into the fund reserve for 19. So if we come in significantly under budget, which again, like was stated last time, we are tracking for a pretty significant, coming under budget, just because we've kind of spent the better part of the year so far developing the work plan rather than executing upon it. Those reserve funds, those excess funds will just go back into the reserve for 19. So they're not going to go away. They'll still be available for spending. So if we do have some projects come forward that require some additional capital in 19, we will have reserve funds that could be potentially used to pay for those projects. Basically, what I did with the instructed the finance director to do was take that worksheet that we talked about last meeting and basically just put that into the 2019 request, which is what you see on the screen in front of you and in the packet material. Again, this basically kind of, if you go back to that, or what we talked about last time, is it funds the bulk of what we anticipated on the work plan items getting brought forward. What it doesn't account for is the fact that if, say, a project does not get funded in 18 or done in 18, there could be like those reserves get brought forward into 19. Currently, and I was just looking for the email, and I don't have that right in front of me, but I believe the current fund balance for the EDA is approximately 170,000, and so is what we currently have in the fund balance. So there's some funds there. So again, I know part of the concern at the last meeting was, what if the great project comes forward for the spur on economic development? I think looking at the budget, from 18 to 19, I think there's enough capital reserves built into this that there is enough to keep the ask for the revenue side the same, but still allow for, if we do have some opportunities coming forward in 19, to basically be able to try to fund those using existing fund balance or, what we're kind of currently budgeted for. So at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So the 2017 balance that comes forward
Yep.
is 170,000, and that does what relative to our 53, approximately 5?
So the way this is set up right now, there's 53,000 worth of revenue that came in that was offset by 53,000 worth of expenses that were anticipated when we did the budget for 18.
Gotcha.
Obviously, to date, we have not executed on all those projects because, we were spent a lot of the time kind of planning on how we're going to spend those monies, not just kind of throwing stuff at the wall, but with purpose behind them. So as a result, if you look back, I don't have the year-to-dates are on there. I mean, we're significantly under budget for 19. I mean, now granted, that year-to-date's probably, there's a few things that are withstanding on there, so it could be a little bit higher, but I mean, we're well under budget. So when we come in at the end of 18, whatever is left over will roll back into that fund balance. So that fund balance will increase by that, so there will be more capital there for project 19. Because I know that was a concern last time, was like, let's just increase the revenues so we can account for that budget. What I'm saying right now is that there's enough in fund balance to account for that. However, if, moving forward, if that fund balance keeps growing up, the recommendation would be to reduce the amount of revenues coming in, because obviously if we're not spending it, we shouldn't levy for it. So, but I say this year kind of as an anomaly, where we're doing the work plan and execution side of it, it's okay to keep that same ask going into 19.
So year-to-date, we spent maybe 5,000, and then we have the things that we've talked about, buy local downtown incentives, Trax bus, and CDA grants. We give an allocation of that, somewhere in the category of 35. So in other words, we've got maybe $25,000, $30,000 for the balance of this year, plus we can have some comfort in the 170,000 that sits there.
Correct, yeah, I mean, and it's one of those things where if you have the project that comes forward that, requires, additional capital, you do have some reserves that are there. I just wanted the EDA to be aware of that there is a fund that's available that does have some reserves built into it.
We were gonna add some signage to the building here.
That was out of the excess funds that were from the building there's still some revenues that were still in the fund from when the building was built, construction. So there's
So
excess.
that's not coming out?
No, that's not coming out of this. That's coming out of a different line item.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, over the years, how did we arrive at the 170,000?
I'd have to go back and do the backtrack on the accounting on that. I just asked for what the current fund balance was and just kind of took the number. And I had to verify too that we have no offsetting expenses against it. I asked Hannah, I said, can I just get the number of that fund balance? That's what she gave me. So it basically just shows that there is some money there. I'd have to go back and do another level of dive through that number to verify that there's no offsetting expenses. But what she told me was approximately, right around 170,000 is in the fund balance.
But that's not over and above the 53 budget this year.
This should add to it, because this is an
is in that
operations.
fund,
Yep.
so.
Yeah, this will go to the fund after the year.
Okay. So Mark, you were wanting some changes last time to the budget.
Actually, like I said last time, I don't have a rationale that says I want more than the 53-something. My thought was that we had 53-something and we were going to spend essentially 35 plus something out of it already, and I didn't have a sense of this $170,000. I thought everything we'd have to reach for would be back at city council level, and that it wasn't really our fund to consider. We would have to have the other authority really deal with it. But if truly $170,000 is in the bank, so to say, for the EDA, then any of my concerns are totally erased, about having anything to draw on for the unknowns and the things that might come along that we value as really high potential. So, no, in terms of changing things right now, I'm not pressed to change anything.
Anybody else see need to change, increase, decrease?
Well, not with that kind of fund balance. We've been working with a lot less than that, so.
And again, let me go back, I'm going to verify that there's no, again, that was the number I was told. There could be an expense, but I'm 90% sure that's a valid number at this point.
It almost feels like some of that came out of this development or something to get that high.
Yeah, and I don't know, I didn't, I was, kind of in passing at the end of the day, I said, I need a fund balance, can do it at a meeting here, and she gave it to me, and, we've been working on kind of other budget items, I just need to get a placeholder for that, so, but you're right, it could be from that, I don't exactly know where those revenues
I'd
came
be
from.
curious if somehow you.
I think some of the lease payments from this building go back into the EDA. I don't think 100% of the lease payments that the city is making are going just to the bond. I think,
Okay.
isn't there a portion of that
Yeah, I had to verify,
something like
verify
that.
that as well. I guess, the one thing too is just to, to kind of put everybody's mind at ease, is that regardless of what that fund balance is, that whatever we don't spend this year, that money will go available to next year. I think that was a major concern I heard coming out of last meeting was, we're going to give away 20,000 if we don't spend it. Well, no, it's still going to be there. It'll still be accessible in 19. So, as we kind of get the work plan going and get, momentum behind there, as we start to see the expenses ramp up to kind of fund some of the work plan items, we will have fund balance available at the current funding level. And as 19 unfolds, and if we start seeing, we're not expending those revenues or we're not needing that much revenue, then we can maybe for 20's budget have a discussion about decreasing that revenue side.
If you
And,
would, I'd like to, talk to you about how that was constructed, just my curiosity.
The 50,000?
No, the 170.
Yeah, I'll go back through, yeah, we can definitely, I can definitely pull that information. I
Okay.
just don't have it at my fingertips right now.
And Chris, a question for you. The development grant for, like, the site we've been talking about, what percentage or how much would the city be putting in on that?
So President Winnick, there's two different pools. We've got a small pool that you can ask for up to $10,000. And if you're asking for that small pool, we'll put in $1 for every 20 cents the city puts into that project. For the large pool, it's a dollar-to-dollar match, and we'll go up to $40,000. And if you have a couple of projects, we've talked about a number of different small area plans, we can do more than one grant per year for a total of up to $40,000 per city per year. So we do have some flexibility.
All right, great.
And the approach that's coming at you relative to these grants, thinking of, say, 2, instead of 1. I know we started with the Herrick property and said, why not? And there's a whole lot of information sitting out there already on the Herrick property in terms of understanding what those costs would be and how to break it down. Then we shift to our 80 or 120 acres south. And we started talking about that, and we still have to get to a point where we're going to be able to tell Ryan what it is we want to do so that he can construct a proposal to see where we stand and how much money we might have to pay to get this evaluated like we would want. And so I'm still pressing that somehow we're moving forward to some kind of deadline yet. I think I'm going to draw, for my own purposes, our land south of the library to define where I think the departure lines are so that they can get a general sense of it's purely commercial, it turns into something, it turns into residential at the far end, how that whole transformation can happen to get something started here so that we can actually tell Ryan where we think we want to go. It can be challenged and done with however anybody wants to do with it, but I want to get this forward so that he can react, so that you can react, so we know what kind of pools we're drawing on. If the Herrick land is, maybe there's a data center prospect there, There's a variety of ways to look at this. I'm just looking to see how we move forward so we've got a tangible step done with a deadline, which is what we're always pushing for. The Jamie from the south building residential coming north, I'd certainly like to understand his north edge. Maybe I work out with Donovan Hart, about where that really is. It doesn't have to be exact. Nothing here is exact, but I just want to see where we are in trying to define a division line or a generalized platting idea so that we're accounting for a variety of things and know what we're talking about with that piece of land. So that's my push, and that's what I'll do just to get that rolling again. What I drew before is a little more erroneous, and there can be a better statement made about it. So if I can catch what Jamie's doing south, and if I can show something, maybe we can actually get this to the point where we're telling Ryan what we want to do so we can come to you for a matching grant.
President Winnick, if I could just respond, Commissioner Finneman, thank you for those points. I do want to clarify, though, that the pre-development finance fund is not intended to do housing, so our intent is to do commercial and industrial, so just kind of keep that in mind.
Yep.
The second thing is I should mention that tomorrow our presentation to the county board for our 2019 budget does include $150,000 for next year as well, so if you were interested and you wanted to do up to $40,000 this year, we do hope to ask for another $150,000 for the program to be refunded for one more year. So there's a chance that we could do more projects, hopefully, if the EDA wishes. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I think one of the biggest challenges with 120 acres is looking at the utility layouts down there. And if and or when public works / water treatment / water tower get put in. So I think, yeah, Ryan, I don't know if that's something that we have to get a proposal from Bolton and Mink, or is that within our normal parameters?
I know coming up here, I don't know when we're talking about it, but I saw some stuff already, probably in conjunction with the rate utility study. We've worked with Public Works to develop a CIP for the future infrastructure. It's more a matter when you want to start moving forward on some of that stuff. Obviously, the first things we need to address is with the amount of projects and the growth of the city is how can we continue to produce potable water at the capacity needed, and then at some point we start catching up, not just in a storage volume-wise, but another tower would be needed in the south for pressure as you continue the growth work. But that's kind of all laid out in the plan based on population projections, known existing applications that are in, and estimation on housing units per those applications, public, private projects. So it's all laid out there and very well thought out, especially the next 10 years of what's needed for your water supply stuff. It's just, really, the next question is funding. You know, so I think that's what will be on the city council agenda tonight, is your rate study that is proposed, which will show you, you know, opportunities on how to fund that. So once all those things are in place, then certainly we start making, you know, movement forward and getting that stuff approved, permitted, and then constructed, so.
All right.
But I do plan on hopefully having some time this year in the budget season to really educate that, the decision makers on that, so we understand what we're deciding and why, so.
All right, thank you, Ryan. Dan, can we, let's put on the next EDA agenda to have a grant application discussion and where do we want to go with that, small or large, or both, or?
We'll get that added to the next agenda.
All right.
If I, just one thing, if, when you clarify that one, if there is 170,000, I think we should really, you know, if, as far as the Hool property and talking about David Rachi's project, you know, he's come to us saying that he wants us to pay for a study to maybe look into a convention center / entertainment type venue, hotel. If there's that money available, I think we should maybe bring that back up for discussion to see if that's something that we'd want to do as a whole.
Can that be with a private developer sort of in tow already?
Thank you for that question. I was going to reference that earlier. If there is already a developer that had to step forward and expressed an interest in a site, our intent is not to fund those types of projects, but it's really to take those projects that are just kind of hanging out there and really nothing happening, no developer has been identified, and try to get that moving in some way, shape, or form. The concern is that if we come in after a developer's already been selected, we could be looked at as just, you know, incentivizing or lining the pockets of that developer. We want to really take those harder to fund sites and get them ready, not the sites that are ready to go, if you will, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess I wasn't really specifically saying partnering with the county on that individual thing, but if there's funds available here that we're trying to, not that you want to spend money, but that's just maybe an opportunity that we need to look at harder.
Yeah, his proposal was, remember, that tax on the motels thing, to raise the funds for that study. And this might be a better alternative. Well, at least something to talk about, something to think about.
And I don't think they're going down that path at all for the, you know, the hospitality tax. So other paths, but the other property that I brought up a long time ago, the MnDOT going north 97 and 61, really one of the most vital, beautiful pieces to do something with. And I think you have a partnership now with the city, private ownership, easements up the kazoo and stuff, and then MnDOT. And a little wetland in there that has to be dealt with. But there is a piece of land that more short-term rather than long-term. I would just love to somehow be in front of you with these opportunities so we can talk about them.
Yep.
So there's a drawing already about that can at least suggest what might happen there. So we could be moving forward and starting to feed you with what you need to know.
Yeah.
Except the biggest problem with that one is it's owned by MnDOT, and as of now, they have no intention of letting it go.
Well, we don't
We
have to
have to
actually have their property. We might be able to find a mutual benefit in doing some stormwater management on their property, but we can stay pretty free of their property. And they could maybe be a good partner and say diminish some of their use and need, and we could maybe use some of their land for water management because it's the natural place for it to happen. So, you know, we got partners to talk with.
Lots of possibilities.
So just, I mean, before we kind of move on off the budget, is it possible to just get a motion recommending the approval of the budget? So we have that memorialized that the EDA is okay with the budget as presented, just so I have that for the finance director.
I'll look for that motion.
I will make the motion that we approve the proposal.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. All right, motion carries. And the building department updates.
President, members of the EDA, again, as I've listened to the EDA talk in the past, I kind of feel like you guys are in a little bit of a silo compared to what's going on in the city in terms of development. So I reached out to the Fire Chief Newman, who's in charge of the building department here in the city of Forest Lake, and kind of asked him for a year-over-year, first 6 months update as to where we are in 18 versus where we were in 17, just in terms of number of permits issued and overall valuation. I think the valuation component of this, take this with a grain of salt, because the numbers in 18 are less than they were in 17. However, other commercial properties in 17, we had some pretty significant projects come forward, a lot with the school district, so that number was probably skewed higher. I think the main key is what you're looking at is, A, the new residential, we see an increase there, and a sizable increase in other residential from 415 in 17 to 751 in 18. So overall, we're seeing a lot more permit issuance in 18. I also just want to commend the building department as a whole. We had we had some staffing issues or challenges just to kind of go through with people out on leave, and we did our first kind of dipped our toes in the water with doing some contract work, and they have really stepped up, and we're still, it just shows that so far today, we put over 300 permits additional into the system, and yeah, the whole department as a whole has done a phenomenal job of making sure that permits are being issued and permits are being placed out the door. Inspections, these are what actually, when we go out and do the building inspections, there's a slight decrease in 18. One of the reasons for that small decrease was that we were starting to see some of the storm damage come in 17, so that number was higher. But 18, I guess overall, in talking to Al, he says these numbers should probably level off, and they should be pretty much normalized from year over year on that one. Another one that is a key indicator just in terms of what the economic activity is in the city is its plan review. In 17, we had about 67 plan reviews in for the first half, and now we're up to 106. So more building plans are coming forward for review. So just kind of wanted to bring that to the EDA's attention, just to kind of show what the building department is doing. I think a lot of times we don't really know what the day-to-day work is behind the scenes, and just kind of wanted to give an opportunity to present some numbers mid-year versus at the end of the year. So, at this point, we're tracking that we're going to have another pretty robust year. Looking forward into 19. I've had some conversations just with some land developers and just with some people who are kind of site selectors in the area, and they're saying they anticipate another year of pretty steady growth, and then kind of past that, they don't quite know, but they said a lot of their clients at this point are pretty much have work in the pipeline for another full year. So they're saying that this trend, again, early indicators say that this should continue through 19 as well. So it's just, good example of some growth that's happening here in the city.
I don't understand the plan review, the 58% increase. When I look at the numbers, new residential, new commercial, other commercial fire protection, added up, between 17 and 18, there's not that big a difference, but yet almost, 58% increase on that, so.
And it could be in that other residential. You see a pretty big jump in the other residential permits. I don't quite know what all triggers a plan review on that one. Chief Newman will be able to speak a little bit better to that than I'm able to. But, again, on the plan review side, I guess some of those other residential areas came forward. Must have been some other projects that would trigger a plan review, which is why you see the increase there.
All right, thank you, Dan.
Would decks be in that?
What's that?
Decks?
I don't think so.
Don't think so. Those are pretty routine.
Dozens and dozens of decks, and it's more than 106 already this year. I think it might refer to the more substantial, like house additions, new homes, and, where, there's significant development review versus, permits could be any number of other types of, it could be a mechanical, it could be a plumbing, where the city may not do the actual review, but still issue the permit.
Well, thank you. Any other questions?
This is somewhat related to building, but the GONE project at the old City Hall site, Obviously, people are moving in and that. I'm a little surprised at the state of First Street or First Avenue.
Second Avenue?
Second, is it Second? You know, there's some people that, you know, I've heard horror stories where they can't even get a CO when their driveway's not completed in their own home, but yet you've got a road that's completely tore up. You've got railings, wood railings that are temporarily. I think I'm glad that people are moving in. I know they had some delays, but I'm just a little surprised and curious to know what's going on with Second there, I guess.
I think Second is just waiting for the right, you know, getting other things. I mean, it got really backed up there. But is it First, or, it'd be Third Street, I guess, that is paved into their parking lot, and that's why the individual units are getting their COs on there. Is that correct?
Yeah, so they are able to have, we did look at making sure that they had access in that was, you know, handicap accessible. And so what you see on Second Avenue has been, you know, I guess the ideal world, there wasn't any issue on Second Avenue, it would have been complete at the same time. However, there was some challenges on Second Avenue that are there and they're still existing that we're working through right now. However, we kind of decoupled that Second Avenue project as it's, you know, you can make the argument that it's a public street, not necessarily the private side of it. And then what they did on the private side, they were able to maintain accessible access all the way into the building. So we were able to say, okay, based on that temporary access, you know, and if they put the temporary railings in, we're able to do the temporary COs for that, which, you know, you're right, on some of them, on the housing side, you know, again, we have done that in the past on certain circumstances as well. So I wanted to make sure that we were kind of following our protocols that we did in the past on that. And what I was told is that there are circumstances where the same thing would be followed for a private homeowner as well as this issue. But we wanted to make sure that we kind of decoupled the challenges on Second Avenue because there were people who had existing leases that were in there and, you know, wanted them to be able to start cash flowing their business and try to encourage that occupancy to happen there. But still at the same time, maintain the fact that it is a temporary CO. It's not full CO has not been issued because Second Avenue is a part of that whole project for completion before the full CO is issued.
Okay.
Did that junction box get moved yet, you know?
That I don't know. I haven't been up there to see if it has or has not.
The pedestrian flasher controller box?
That was
no,
paved in on Third
Oh, the other
for the
one?
water plant.
I have not.
That's our cost on that, or who's?
No, that'll be theirs.
That'll be their cost, okay. All right, any other questions? Chris, you want to give us an update?
President Winnick and Commissioners, good afternoon again. Just a couple of quick things. Dan and I continue to work on the action steps in the work plan that we've laid out for you, and we'll come back and do another workshop pretty quick here to do an update for you. But just a couple of things just to highlight. We've begun the inventory of assets, and we want to work with the EDA to continue to build that list of assets and then continue to refine our plan around the enhancement of those assets. And then also, just briefly discussing website and marketing programs. We're at the CDA level right now. We're exploring the option to create a county economic development website, but then each city can have their own page as part of that website. And so we would cover the cost for the city and have more of a common tie between all of the cities, hopefully in the county, and then have the cities be able to put whatever content they want on their page and just really do a kind of step up the marketing and promotion, business development opportunities here within the county, but each city could have a custom page, whatever it is that you choose to add. So we hope to have a workshop coming up in the not too distant future and kind of continue to bring you up to speed and work with you on the work plan action steps and check them off as we accomplish them. One more thing I should mention briefly is one of the items, the action steps in the work plan talked about having a collaborative effort with the school district for a career fair this fall, and we'll start working on those details after school starts, hopefully October-ish, maybe end of September, October sometime, and with the goal of trying to help our existing employers continue to attract and retain talent, and then find out about training needs for those employers that are looking for to keep folks at a constant pipeline of talented workers here in the community every day. So we'll continue to work on those action steps and bring information forward. And I don't know, Dan, if you've thought about a date for that workshop, but maybe in September?
For all the rest of the items.
September.
Yeah, looking at probably September, once we kind of get through the budget season and, get back in the fall, probably bring all those items forward in September. Again, just making sure that we're staying on that work plan where we're trying to get some stuff accomplished, some of those boxes checked, like Chris mentioned, but we'll bring that forward in September.
All right, thank you very much.
That's all I have, thank you.
All right. Dan, updates?
I know Commissioner Roberts had a couple of things that he wanted to discuss this evening.
Yes,
Oh, that's right, yeah, you emailed some stuff.
yeah, so about a month ago, I had been noticing along Broadway, particularly and across the roundabout at 61, just the amount of weeds in the landscape. And that was a concern of mine back, just as a resident, excited about the opportunity to have all this landscape and everything, but concerned about whether or not the city would maintain that space and weed it and mulch and all that. And in my opinion, the first couple of years, they tend to do that quite well. But this last year, it's got really bad, it seems. And so I emailed the council and some staff, got some feedback only really from Councilwoman Mara and yourself. Didn't get any other feedback from the other council members, which was a little disappointing. And said they were on it, and so I guess there was some weeding that was done there. But then I happened to look at this picture that Dan has up that I took. This was an EDA initiative that we did out at 35 and Broadway. Ryan took the time to apply for a grant, which we gratefully got and did all four corners. And part of the deal was, and Ryan, maybe you can explain a little bit more, that the MnDOT would provide the plants, but it was the city's responsibility to maintain it. And clearly, that's not happening. So here we are as an EDA trying to think of things to do, and we did this to try to beautify people coming into town, and this is where we're at right now. And so I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. This particular one here is in front of Hool's. Again, just a common area landscape space that the county had did when they redid Broadway, and here's the current state of it. It frustrates me as a resident, as a business owner, but it frustrates me as an EDA person, because we're out here trying to promote the city, and it's tough to really do so when we're looking at our streets looking like that. So I don't know if this is a function of the budget, a function of staffing in Public Works, or what, but clearly something needs to be done here, and I hope that, I don't know what kind of discussion it would bring out of here, but more importantly from the council, if it is a budget thing, that's looked at here as you guys are kind of finalizing your budget for 19.
I think I would say that, it's unfortunately gotten overlooked by Public Works. Dave is really on the ball there, so I don't want to try and make an excuse why it hasn't been done, but once it's brought to his attention, I don't think there's going to be another question about it, and, once he gets it logged in, it's going to be taken care of year after year, so I don't see any, budget where they only have so many hours to mow or anything else. It's just making the people aware of it that are actually on the ground doing that anyway, so. And Dan, did you have?
Yeah, I had a conversation with Dave about this prior to the meeting, just to kind of get, Public Works perspective on this. I said, kind of what are the challenges with these specific sites here? And what he told me, these sites actually are weeded about once a month. And he said, unfortunately, sometimes with this growth that happens in there, he goes, it's tough to keep up on it, in the course of the summer. He said, one of the things with this particular site here was what they've kind of saw as they went through a lot of the material that they actually had planted, the salt from the road, when they come through with the thing, had caused some salt die-off, even though they were planted as salt-tolerant plants. They were supposedly designed to be salt-resistant. However, they have seen some dieback in there. And again, this obviously has some, weeds that are growing in there. But he has said he does have, like before the 4th of July, these areas were gone through and been weeded. He said a lot of it too is just, it's the amount of time that goes through to get those areas weeded. He goes, he can send a crew of seasonals out there, and it doesn't look like much, but when you go through and you have a crew out there trying to maintain all those weeds and pull those weeds, it gets pretty time consuming. So again, he was looking for if there's any creative solutions. He said, well, more than willing to kind of take those back and look at opportunities to try to improve on that. But he kind of said at this point, it's, a function of, the amount that they can get their crews out there to do that right now. He said approximately about once a month, give or take, in terms of pulling all those weeds out of those flower beds that are out there.
It looks like more than a month's growth to me.
Well, and that's just it. I mean, if he's only, really, it probably needs to be done every other week, you know, or whatever, especially in Prime. This is the entrance to our town, people. I mean, this is, I think something needs to be stepped up, whether again, a function of budget, or staff for seasonals, something has to be increased here, because this, in my mind, is not acceptable. And Ryan, when I discussed a little bit, was actually over text, he made the point saying that, you know, if this is the way it's gonna be, to go forward and get additional grants, they're gonna see this, they're just not gonna do it, because they've got other communities that are looking for the same kind of money and we're competing for, and why would they?
I know we used to have, like, I don't know if there still is, but like a garden club, other things in town that would take care of some of the flower beds, other things around the community. Do we still have something like that here, or?
You know, that I'd have to check into, and that was one of the comments that David made, some community will have a garden club kind of take over a certain portion of
I
it.
mean, an area like this is just weed whipping. I mean, you know, somebody in Public Works can, but I think along Broadway and stuff where you got, you know, some of the nicer landscaping, it would be nice to have, some volunteers that
Well,
know what they're doing with it.
Maybe, you know, instead of an adopt a park, adopt a boulevard or something like that. I don't
Exactly.
know. I just, because there's a lot of younger people too that are looking for community hours, both for like you know, National Honor Society or whatever. I mean, they're out there. I guess it's just a matter of time to find them and try to marry the two groups together to benefit both.
And until then, maybe Public Works need to step up to this solution, and we'll see if we can't replace them on a site-specific situation, to see if that would draw volunteerism. But meanwhile, I think you gotta have a baseline, that would be Public Works.
I can go back to them and ask them to see what they can do for these sites.
I think we need to bring this over to Parks, Lakes, and Trails too. You know, see if we can develop some type of volunteer program, any volunteer hours. I like those kind of ideas. But if we can run it through Parks, Lakes, and Trails,
And I know in the past we have, when we have big groups that come in, we do try to get them in to do boulevard weeding and cleanup, because we see quite a bit of demand in there. So if a group comes in and wants to do community service for the afternoon, this is typically a project that we try to align with them, because again, a lot of it is you just need manpower to go in there and do some of that weeding. So we do try to align that when we can. However, it's tough to rely on volunteer efforts when you don't know when the groups are gonna come in.
That's the worst part about it, is putting all your eggs in one basket, like with these volunteers. It has to be done on a regular basis, no question about it. And I think the volunteer thing is fine and dandy, but we as a city have to step up to the plate on this, I think, as far as I'm concerned.
Is this a sentence to serve through the county? Is this an opportunity for them to come up and, I mean, they've got a couple crews out every day throughout the county
Yeah.
looking for things to do. It seems like reaching out to them, that would be a good opportunity.
We can look into that as well.
well, I would assume when this was first done, they were mulched in there pretty good. It looks like that's kind of all gone too.
You have to remulch every couple of years, and it turns to
I would
dirt.
imagine some of that did wash away already, though, you know?
Well, it probably
It's- and
washed
that-
away, but
yeah,
it
that
also
has to
just
be-
deteriorated.
Ryan, how long ago was this installed? Is it 4 years, 4 years ago maybe, or?
First one we did at the old city hall.
Been a while.
Smother it.
All right. Well, thank you for bringing that to our attention, Blake.
Yes, thank you.
So this is 4 or 5 years old?
Maybe 3. So 4.
Yeah.
4.
4 to 5, maybe.
I don't know to the degree the county brought in vegetation. I don't see much.
Well, it was mostly trees, wasn't it?
Yeah, I would imagine so.
And some of the trees are looking a little sad as well, but they still have life.
All right. Dan, do you have anything other on,
Yeah, I just would like to bring forward to the EDA, the city has been approached by a landowner down by the airport looking to sell their property to the city for potential development. Perhaps President Winnick could elaborate on it, but it's just looking at, if the city is entertaining a land purchase, it needs to be purchased for a public purpose. We just can't buy land to have land. We got to have a reason behind it. So looking at it, part of it with the EDA kind of working on developing a future business park, there could be some ability there that if this parcel, if there's desire to kind of pursue a land purchase, would be that this could potentially be developed into an additional business park for the city. Again, this is all, at this point, it was a new kind of ask, you know, the request came forward. So just bring it to the EDA at this point. And again, you know, perhaps President Winnick could, you know, elaborate a little bit more on that if he wants to. But just wanted to get it out in front of the EDA just to kind of see if there's any interest in pursuing additional land purchase at this time, or just kind of getting, you know, again, initial lay of the land in terms of if there's any interest at all to pursue additional land for city purchase for the purpose of developing an additional business park within the city of Forest Lake.
What size parcel?
I believe it was 40, or is it more
Not
than?
quite 40.
Not quite 40.
Is it adjoining already property we own, city owns? or-
It's adjoining some city-owned property now. Since it's not public yet, we can't, you know, and we'd have to have a closed meeting for discussions. But it's a property we have talked about before, and I think it's a good start anyway. So, you know, I think if there's enough interest, but I personally definitely think that the value is there, and it's got retail as well as industrial. It's not going to be the pristine business parks like maybe the 120 acres we have south of Headwaters would be, but I think it definitely fills a need out there that would bring a good tax base to the community. You know, quite a few acres that could be retail, and then, you know, the business park behind, also utilizing about 6 acres of city-owned land that's landlocked, that would otherwise really have no developable qualities to it. This would open that up. We have utilities basically right at the edge of the property, so making it shovel-ready would be very easy. There's no lowlands, wetlands within it at all. Right now, it's being farmed, so I just think there's a lot of potential for this one. And this one is kind of builds on the other pieces that are close by. So it's, you know, which one goes first, but, you know, they're both going to go type of deal, so.
So beyond the abstract nature of it right now, our decision is dependent on having definition of that property. Can we have a closed session so we can understand?
Well, the first thing is, are we interested in doing something? If the answer is yes, then next step would definitely be a closed session so we can have some
Well,
discussions
that's
on
a
it.
generic answer, you know, so if it makes sense, yes, but we have to have the definition of the property. They'll see it makes sense.
So that we know what we might be interested in.
Correct, yeah, and
The general idea of supporting this sort of thing, should it be, as you've described it, ready and good and solid and could be, then we should know about it and we can make a decision.
right, and so I, you know, from understanding from Bridget, our attorney, you know, the steps are first, is there an interest? Because, you know, the offer was brought to the city didn't go to the landowner, so the offer was brought to the city. Yeah, is there interest? Yes, the city can proceed with, you know, looking at the appraisals and valuations of the property, while we can have a discussion on, does it make sense? Is it something we want to proceed with? But, you know, at least at that point, we can have a closed meeting to discuss it on our side.
Well, then the open book answer is yes, for me.
Well, I think we should at least look at it. How are we ever going to know if we don't look at it? You know,
I mean,
so,
It's just the rules and procedures of,
this-
Well, do you want to poll us and for yeses and?
Well,
and
no, I guess I'm just
further?
seeing that there's some potential there for looking at the possibility of that. And again, the closed session part of it, there's certain particular criteria that you can only go into closed session for. Part of that is negotiation of a real estate transaction. However, I'd have to find out when, are we able to go in before the property is publicly identified or after? I got to figure out that component of it. At this point, it was basically a new offer. If we had no desire at all at the EDA level to even entertain this, I wasn't going to put any time into pursuing this. However, it sounds like there might be a little bit of interest to at least keep this ball in play, so to speak. So we'll at least get to that next level of detail, and we'll get that on the process for discussion at a future meeting. And again, I'd have to work with the city attorney to figure out exactly what has to happen in the public open meeting session and what happens in the closed session, because I know there is state law that allows you to go into a closed session for the land negotiations, because obviously you don't want to have that in an open meeting.
Just so we
Alright.
keep all prospects in play, that's the goal here.
Any other business to bring before the EDA? Hearing none, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
And do we have a second? All those in favor?
I
Aye.
Adjourned.